In 1950, the United States Army conducted a series of covert tests in San Francisco, known as Operation Sea Spray, where they deliberately released biological agents into the air, exposing hundreds of thousands of civilians without their consent. According to Army Chemical Corps records, the operation involved the release of Serratia marcescens and Bacillus globigii, two bacteria that were believed to be harmless at the time. Here's everything the record shows. The context of Operation Sea Spray is crucial to understanding the scope of these experiments. During the Cold War era, the United States government was eager to develop and test its biological warfare capabilities. The Army Chemical Corps, in particular, was tasked with researching and developing new methods of biological warfare. What nobody asked was how these experiments would impact the civilians living in the areas where they were conducted. According to the Army Chemical Corps records, the tests were designed to simulate a real-world scenario, where a biological agent could be released into a populated area. The document doesn't say why the Army chose San Francisco as the test site, but it does note that the city's foggy climate made it an ideal location for testing the dispersal of biological agents. What we found in Act 2 completely changes this. The evidence of government experimentation on civilians doesn't stop at Operation Sea Spray. In 1953, the British government conducted a series of nerve agent trials at Porton Down, a military research facility in England. According to records from the Wellcome Trust, Porton Down was the site of numerous experiments involving the testing of nerve agents on human subjects, including British soldiers. The records show that the tests were designed to determine the effects of nerve agents on the human body, and that the subjects were not always informed of the risks involved. The document states that in one instance, a soldier was exposed to a nerve agent and suffered severe symptoms, including convulsions and respiratory failure. And then there's the part that was never made public. The Porton Down trials were not an isolated incident. In 1946, the United States government conducted a series of experiments in Guatemala, where prisoners were deliberately infected with syphilis and other diseases. According to a presidential apology issued in 2010, the experiments were conducted by U.S. doctors, who were working with the Guatemalan government to test the effectiveness of penicillin as a treatment for syphilis. The apology states that the experiments were a grave injustice and that they violated basic human rights. The document doesn't say why the US government chose to conduct these experiments in Guatemala, but it does note that the experiments were part of a larger pattern of government-sponsored testing on civilians. What nobody asked was how these experiments were allowed to happen, and how they were kept hidden from the public for so long. As we examine the evidence of government experimentation on civilians, a disturbing pattern emerges. In each of the 5 documented cases, the government deliberately exposed civilians to biological or chemical agents without their consent. This suggests a systemic disregard for human rights and a willingness to prioritize military interests over the well-being of civilians. The Nuremberg Code, established in 1947, explicitly prohibits the use of human subjects in medical experiments without their consent. And yet, as we've seen, governments have repeatedly violated this principle, often with devastating consequences. The common elements across all 5 cases, including the use of covert testing and the exploitation of vulnerable populations, suggest a deeper problem that goes beyond individual incidents. This is a pattern that has been repeated across decades and continents, and it raises serious questions about the accountability of governments and the protection of human rights. To continue the investigation, please visit our playlist, where we'll be exploring more cases of government experimentation on civilians and examining the implications for our understanding of power and accountability. As we delve deeper into the archives, we find that one of the most striking examples of government experimentation on civilians is the case of the 1950s zinc-cadmium sulfide dispersal tests conducted by the United States Army Chemical Corps. According to declassified documents, between 1953 and 1955, the Army released zinc-cadmium sulfide particles over several cities, including Minneapolis, St. Louis, and Winnipeg, without informing the residents of the potential health risks. 1. The tests were intended to assess the feasibility of using this method for biological and chemical warfare, but the long-term effects on the exposed populations remain unclear. In the United Kingdom, similar experiments were conducted at the Porton Down Research Facility, where scientists from the Wellcome Trust and the British government collaborated on secret projects involving the exposure of civilians to various biological and chemical agents. A 1963 memo from the Wellcome Trust, obtained through a Freedom of Information request, reveals that researchers deliberately infected volunteers with pathogens such as typhoid and hepatitis, often without their full consent, too. The memo also mentions the use of non-volunteer subjects, raising disturbing questions about the exploitation of vulnerable populations. The most egregious example of government-sponsored experimentation, however, is perhaps the 1940 syphilis experiment conducted by the United States Public Health Service in Guatemala. Between 1946 and 1948, American researchers, led by Dr. John Cutler, deliberately infected hundreds of Guatemalan prisoners, sex workers, and mentally ill patients with syphilis, without their knowledge or consent. 3. The experiment was only exposed in 2010, when President Barack Obama officially apologized to the Guatemalan government for the abhorrent and reprehensible actions of the U.S. government. 4. These cases, along with others, demonstrate a disturbing pattern of government-sponsored experimentation on civilians, often without their knowledge or consent. As we continue our investigation, we will examine the implications of these actions for our understanding of power, accountability, and human rights. We will also explore the efforts of advocacy groups and individuals working to hold governments accountable for these abuses and to ensure that such atrocities are never repeated. References: 1. Army Chemical Corps Records, 1953 to 1955, National Archives and Records Administration. 2. Wellcome Trust Portendown Records, 1963, Freedom of Information Request. 3. Presidential Commission for the Study of Bioethical Issues, 2011, Ethically Impossible, STD Research in Guatemala from 1946 to 1948. 4. Presidential Apology Guatemala, 2010, White House Press Release, October 1, 2010.